All right. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Cheryl. I am your host, Cheryl Lacey Donovan, and we are ecstatic about the fact that you have decided to join us here today. Just a little FYI, myself and my counterpart over here, my colleague Nicolette Hines, we's in Houston, Texas. And they keep saying Hannah is on its way. I don't know where it is right now, but we're going to try to make this thing happen before it gets too bad outside, okay? I also have with me my label mate, Hurley Morgan. He is one of the authors with Pieces of Fun Publishing. You guys have seen both of these people on the broadcast before, and I brought them back because of their expertise in today's topic. So today we're asking, how are you really doing? Because I know, I don't know about you guys, but most of the time when you ask somebody that question, usually they give the padded answers. I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm doing fine. But then if you were really to dig deeper and say, no, tell me how you really doing, then the comments become, oh, I'm a little overwhelmed, I'm a little stressed, I'm a little anxious, especially during this pandemic time. So wanted to just kind of touch bases and talk about, I have a conversation about mental health during this pandemic, right? During this pandemic. So what I want to do first is allow you all an opportunity to tell everybody a little bit about who you are and how you fit into this mental health piece. So Nicolette, I'll start with you. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I, I think you're stuck, Nicolette. Okay, well, Hurley, you go ahead. I don't know. It seems like she might be a little stuck right there. So you go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Again, like Cheryl said, I'm Hurley Morgan. I'm coming in from North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, to be exact. And as far as mental health is concerned, I've been in the human services / mental health field for like 21 years now. So pretty much almost half my life I've been dealing with mental health in some sort of capacity. Right now, I'm currently working in as a supervisor in a mental health agency where we utilize a model called family-centered treatment, which is definitely one that deals with trauma and those kind of areas where we go in and kind of work with the families and trying to get them to understand, the underlying issues that they've probably been working on surface issues all this time, just to try to get to the root of the matter so they can understand what it is that's causing families to be the way they are. So it's a family approach, not just the individual, but the family. So, which has afforded me the opportunity to continue to grow over the last 3 to 4 years and understand what truly is going on in the communities as it pertains to mental health. So, so I've been doing it for a while and I've seen any and everything possible, which, I think that allows for me to be able to talk about my experiences a little bit.
Okay, awesome. So Nicolette, you let the people know what you do in this arena.
Well, of course, my educational background is psychology. Um, I've been to tons of classes, and that's what I got my master's degree in applied psychology. But mental health has always been my passion, especially mental health counseling and being a mental health professional, helping people to cope in teaching interventions and, just teaching people how to manage through crisis. And crisis intervention is one of my specialties. I've worked for Harris Center for Mental Health and IDD. I worked there 5 years, but I also have a background with, dealing with many people, the family. We have a family background of mental, illness. So that's why I've always been interested in, finding out about how to cope through mental illness and teaching others on how to, deal with their certain life crisis.
So I want to talk about the elephant in the room because when this young man has his outbursts, and he's obviously not the only one in the entertainment arena right now that's having some issues in this area. You know, Tamar Braxton, I understand Nick Cannon may also have had some issues as to why he kind of went off the way that he did. But the one that seems to be the most prolific at this point is Kanye West.
Right.
And, you know, I put that out there because it's easy for people to laugh about and joke about. But at the end of the day, obviously, there are some issues there. And so I
Yes.
want to kind of speak to the difficulty, you know, especially with the family, because the other thing that I heard was, oh, well, they need to get him some help, and they, you know, they are a Kardashian curse and all of that. But having been through it myself personally, it can be difficult getting an adult into the system if they choose not to. And then I just want to give a little bit of background. I know many years ago, maybe back in the 1900s or whatever, it was very easy to put somebody in a mental institution. You know, you could go in for something like moral turpitude because you slept with a married man, or because you know, and so it was very easy. People could just say, okay, they just need to go for issues of infidelity or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they became more stringent. And I think they went too far on the opposite end to where now it's so hard. So can you, both of you kind of speak to that, the difficulty for the family dealing with someone, as well as how other people view it, because they see it as, oh, he's just making a choice. He's just acting like that just because, when in fact, maybe that's not the case.
Mr. Morgan, you gonna go first?
Nah, ladies first. You can go ahead.
Okay. So I think when people don't understand mental illness, they try to normalize it. And they put it in a category where they want to have the thought that people can handle their emotions, that people are able to manage when they are overstressed, or even if they're off their meds. Some people cannot manage, without medication, and I believe the episodes that he displays more like bipolar. It looks like a bipolar manic episode. And what that looks like is that during times of manic, when they're having a manic attack, it's like an extreme high. I want to be the president of the United States. I want to run my campaign after the birthday party. I want to run America like Wakanda. And, all of that is, an extreme high, and you're just over the top, just out there, throwing things out. And a lot of times when people are having that bipolar episode, it's the people that they're closest to that they usually attack. Those are the people that they feel are against them. They come, they're angry at them, so it's really hard to deal with someone who is having that type of episode. And then it comes to the point where they just crash, and when they crash, it's an extreme low. That's why they call it bipolar. So then the crash is like depression. Now I'm so low, I want to commit suicide. Some people run to drugs. Some people, that are famous and that have did great things in their manic state. They wrote books. They did great things because they couldn't sleep. A lot of times you lose sleep when you're in that stage. You spend a lot of money. You may just, you just over the top with everything, and then you come crashing down. So, and when you're in that stage, your family member, has to be educated on, how to recognize, what is going on. And once they recognize, the only way that I've realized that you could actually put your loved one into a mental institution is here in Texas. I know that you have to go and get a mental health warrant.
Yeah.
So you have to go through the court, get a mental health warrant. That's if they're not volunteering, to go to like the NPC, or, like in Houston, Texas, we have the NPC where they can actually go and get emergency psychiatric help because they're a danger to themselves and they're a danger to others. But here you must get a mental health warrant in order to have your loved one picked up and put into, a mental institution. So no, they're not able of helping themselves apart from medication.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And just like Nicolette was saying, like the fact that he's been diagnosed with bipolar, that's one of those mental health disorders that once you have that diagnosis, is pretty much lifelong. And it's dealing with the brain and the chemical imbalances in the brain, which means that the medication that a person has is there to put everything back in perspective and they have their brain regulate as it should. When you're not on the medication, that's when everything becomes irregular. So that means being very impulsive behaviors, like she was saying, I can be the president and I don't even have any experience in being a politician, which like someone in the office right now.
Right.
So but for someone like Kanye to go through that, you will see every now and then he has these moments where it's out and off the wall, like people who are quote unquote sound mind, so to speak, will look at him like, okay, what is really going on? He's crazy this, he's crazy that. How can the people around him allow for him to be this way? But again, you can have people in your life to help you in these situations. But at the end of the day, it's still a choice of your own, whether or not you want to stay on the medication, whether or not you want to get the therapy and treatment, because he has these choices alone. And he had these issues before he even became a part of the Kardashian family. So, and everybody say that, okay, he had an issue with mom passing away. Yes, that's a traumatic thing in some people's lives. Some people deal with it differently, and that could cause trauma in the brain, so to speak, for some people, which also will allow for certain issues to come into play when it comes down to the brain. But for someone like Kanye, it's a lifelong thing. And unless he gets this medication and stay on his medication, we're going to constantly see these things from Kanye. And it's for me, and I'm sure Nicolette being in the field like this is like normal stuff that we see. I'm not alarmed at all by what he's doing. It's like I look at him and say, okay, he's having an episode, which is something that happens. That's a normal thing for people who are bipolar, whether or not they're on the medicine or not. They will have these manic episodes where, like Nicolette said, they can be up for days on end, no sleep, and a lot of good things come from it. And that's probably what explains why he's able to write the music he writes. He's on his, when he's on that writing thing, he's writing all this music, which explains that. But then you have that crash where he's maybe severely depressed and talking about harming himself in a way. And those kind of things, like Nicolette said, it's also about educating the people around you. Because I know, Cheryl, we've had discussions about this before, especially in the African American community. It's a taboo thing where mental health is we know it's there, but we still trying to educate our people on the importance of it. Some people say we will pray it away, we'll put it on the altar and all that good stuff, and that's great. We have that spiritual background, which we all need, in our life. However, when it comes down to it, just like diabetes, high blood pressure, all that stuff can shut down your body physically. The same with the brain. The brain is just like the heart. It's a muscle in the body that needs to be taken care of. And just like you do exercise for your body, you got to exercise your brain as well, which means you may have to do therapy. You may have to take medication for it. So in our community, we have to do a better job with educating and talking about it, and not letting it be like the elephant in the room, like you say, because that's where it sits in a room. And it's so big in a room sometimes that we see it, but we still look past it. Just like the situation we got in the office right now. We have mental health right there. So we got to be able to do a better job, especially moving forward after this pandemic. Everybody's gonna need it, because we're dealing with not only trauma ourselves, but secondary trauma of seeing trauma. So we definitely got a lot of work to do in this field, in making sure that everybody, like a Kanye West, can get the help he needs, and it helps us understand that if Kanye has kids, the likelihood of his kids having bipolar goes through the roof because it's hereditary in some sense. So those are some of the things we definitely want to take into consideration, especially in this time dealing with everything else we have going on. I mean, he has past stuff going on, but he's also dealing with the effects of what's going on now. So that causes more stress in our lives. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do. So I mean,
yeah. So I think that this happening now with Kanye and things like that will hopefully create more dialogue, like what we're having here, because at some point you have to recognize that what he's doing is not common. That's just, it's not just, oh, he's just decided that he wants to do something crazy or something silly, or no, there is a pathology behind that as to why that's happening. And Nicolette, you touched on something that I wanted to talk about also with the substance abuse, because can y'all expound on the fact that many of these people, they know something, they know their thoughts are racing, or they know their thoughts are not fitting in the way that they should. And so what do? They self-medicate. Can you all speak to that?
Yes. It's called a co-occurring disorder. A co-occurring disorder is when someone decides, well, I'm not gonna use my medication. I have a mental illness, but I also have a substance abuse issue. So it's a co-occurring disorder. But self-medicating is when people, decide, I'm not going to use the medicine that my doctor prescribed me, but I'm just going to go smoke crack, because crack, helps, balance me out. I can really hang, I can stay up all night if I want to, without feeling the, blah, blah, blah. But see, what happens is that makes the mental health situation even worse. And just, can you imagine that a person in a manic state go smoke crack? They on this high, the crack making on, you can't sleep already, the crack got them on this high. But when that drug wears off, the crash is even worse. That's when people end up in serious situations. I've seen it where people, have end up in very, very, very devastating situations after things like that. They end up homeless for days on the street, no baths, walking barefooted. I mean, it takes a real toll on them. And so that's why in the mental health field, there's funding for co-occurring disorders, and a lot of people are taking on the co-occurring disorders, because that's what we see downtown. A lot of times we see mental illness that is actually, kissed the lips of an addiction, a drug addiction. And so, and it looks really, really bad, and the only way out of it is someone has to specialize in helping them to come out of that situation. Another thing I wanted to say is that people have to also accept that they have a mental illness. And once you accept that you have a mental illness, you have to use the proper, treatment in order to cope. And you also need to be educated yourself on your triggers, things that trigger you. And then you have to be aware of things that can make your situation worse, like substance abuse. So that takes a person that really wants to manage their mental illness. A person in denial is not going to do that.
Right. And I want to, first thing I want to say is for people to understand how mental health works and the importance of mental health. Something such as worry, in the Christian world, we talk about, faith and worry can't occupy the same brain, right? So just understanding that worry itself, which is a form of anxiety, is a mental health. Most people don't understand that anxiety, worry is a mental illness. It's a mental health situation that needs to be addressed. That's how minimum it could be, to as great as somebody being bipolar or paranoia, schizophrenia, and those kind of things. So understanding, and like Nicolette was, talks about the substance abuse, adding substance abuse in on top. Substance abuse is a mental health disorder. It becomes a mental health disorder, and it's a diagnosis. Substance abuse, like marijuana abuse, cannabis abuse, those kind of things becomes, in the United States, we use the DSM-5 at this point, and when they have these codes for these mental health disorders. So when it comes down to somebody that has substance abuse, and a mental health disorder that are coexisting. You know, I know in North Carolina, one of the things that we have to look at when we deal with that type of individual, we have to address the substance abuse first, because the substance abuse is, like we say, they lean to that as self-medicating, and it becomes more important. Like, for instance, you got somebody who may be coming out of jail who's dealing with mental health disorders and substance abuse. Guess what? You know, you put them in an area where they've been rehabilitated and the substance abuse is gone, but you put them in an area where there's substance abuse. Now, all of a sudden, they get connected back to the substance abuse, which flares back up the mental health, and all of it comes in order. Like Kanye West, like she was saying, if you have, you know, a manic disorder, a manic episode, and you all of a sudden you start taking a type of drug that speed up your brain. There's suppressants, and then there's stimulants, so to speak. One that's going to stimulate you. Guess your manic episode is now times whatever.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Like she was saying, once you come off that high, it's like falling off the 8-story building, and you're gonna hit that ground. And when you hit that ground, you're gonna feel the effects of it. And so, you know, dealing with, you know, substance abuse and mental health becomes more of an issue, because you have one without the other, and sometimes they both coexist, and you got to deal with both of them. But to look at which one do you deal with first. And in our North Carolina, we've been taught to look at the mental at the substance abuse part first, because of the nature behind that part, you know. And even if you have a person that's on medication and self-medicating, psychiatrists would normally ask what's going on, and they may stop their medication because, again, the substance may mess with the actual medication that you're taking. So it's a lot of different elements when it comes down there. So we can, you know, have classes and talk about each one of these individual things all day. So, you know, and just for the sake of time, it's just understanding that when you have people in your life that are dealing with these different areas, whether it's a substance abuse, whether it's mental health, or both, we have to understand what it is that we need to do, because each individual is individualized and you have to treat them as such. So we got to understand what that individual needs. Like somebody like Kanye might be totally different in an approach, and we might deal with someone like Nick Cannon. And so it's like we have to understand where they come from, their history and all that stuff, and what we need to really be addressing with them in the moment. So, you know, again, both of these areas, they're running rampant right now, and they're increasing because more people are turning to substance. Like they say, alcohol use has gone up since this pandemic. So once this dust clear from this pandemic, we're going to have a lot of things to do to repair people's minds as we move forward past this. So yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of patience and understanding, and more important, we have to want to understand, because I think so often we put it on the back burner and thinking it's going to take care of itself, or we want to pray it away, but we don't put in the work to accompany the prayer to make sure that it works for us or it makes the person better. So yeah.
And I think you're very right about the fact that it's difficult for people to understand that everyone is an individual, because I've seen it myself where, you know, you'll tell someone this individual may have some mental health issues, which is part of the reason why they may use certain types of drugs. Right. And then they'll say, well, XYZ has the same situation and they don't do it, or they taking their meds, or they're doing whatever. Okay, that's XYZ. XYZ right. is not ABC. They're right. Different people. They have different makeups, and you know, like you said, it can be difficult to even come to grips with the fact that it is a mental health issue, especially in our community, because it's so taboo. I mean, think about it. Even people that have high blood pressure and diabetes right. and heart disease, many times they don't take their meds like they're supposed right. to either. And right. these are actually physical ailments that sometimes you can or sometimes you cannot see. So that right. can be very difficult. And I think that for families, it becomes hard to deal with, especially if you had not recognized it before, or maybe you did recognize it before. You know, everybody got that Uncle Bobo or mm-hmm. somebody. Oh, that's just mm-hmm. crazy. You know, but that's how you just blew that off and kind of joke about the fact, well, they always do that. When in fact, there were some, again, pathologies happening that you were not privy to or did not understand. And so now it's been perpetuated, and everybody wants to believe that this person can, if they wanted to, they could take control. If they wanted to, they could fix this. If they want, but that's not necessarily the case. And that is so difficult to get other people to understand that, yes, I hear what you're saying. And for us in our rational mind, of course, but the stuff that they're saying and the irrational behaviors and all of that is not something that is as easily controllable as people want to believe. And that is such a difficult barrier to break for some, because they want to believe that at the end of the day, you should be able to do this if you want to.
Right.
And you can't. You have no control over a chemical imbalance. You just don't have control over that. And you mentioned Nick Cannon, and Nick Cannon, his mental health situation and breakdown resembled major depression disorder.
Right.
You know, and you know, a lot of times what happens with like I said, it's always a trigger.
Right.
There's something that triggered with Nick Cannon. What triggered it was his best friend committed suicide. So then also he was dealing with the backlash from a comment that he made. Right. Dealing with racism and that type of thing. Anti-systemic comment he made.
Anti-Semitism, yeah.
Something of that nature. Yes. Okay, so that then the backlash of social media. See, for a person with major depression disorder, things that other folk can just brush off, criticism, you know, that kind of thing is an enemy to a person with major depression disorder, because they automatically have a hard time dealing with self-criticism. Depression makes you feel negative about yourself, or your situation is just, it makes it hopeless. It makes you without hope, you know. And so you handle things emotionally worse than someone that does not have major depression disorder. So your breakdown, you know, comes to the point where things happen in your life, something trigger, and now you in the room for 8 days with no lights on and won't take a bath and suicidal, you know. And at those times, that's why people have to know what they're dealing with, and then they have to identify when they've been triggered, and then they also have to know coping skills. That's why it takes therapy along with medication. Like cognitive behavior therapy and you know, different types of therapies that teach you how to cope when you
I think that families also need some of that training as well, because it is so difficult, especially if the person is in a manic phase. The reaction, eventually the gut reaction or the reaction of some in the family is to just get rid of the person. Get rid of the person. If we put them away, then they'll come back to their senses. Or if we separate ourselves or distance ourselves from the individual, then I don't know, they'll snap back to them. I don't know what the thought process is. But a lot of times that's how you also end up with a lot of people on the street as well, because the families, once again, hands are tied, number one, because what the person needs, they need the therapy, they need the medication. But if they're an adult in particular, you can't make them do that. So then you feel like your hands are tied, and it's easier to just separate yourself and distance yourself, as opposed to having to consistently deal with the behaviors and the issues that person is bringing. I wanted to, Kathy made this comment. She says, my sister was schizophrenic, but we didn't learn this until a few weeks before her death. She died from alcoholism. She drank herself literally to death to get rid of the voices in her head. If we had only known sooner to help her. And I feel like that's a lot of families find themselves in that place.
Right. A lot of the mental health stuff that we deal with is dealing with your cultural makeup, like as far as what you believe in. Like, for example, I work with kids. And one of the kids that we had, the family was from Laos, so they don't necessarily believe in the mental health stuff, especially when it comes down to something like schizophrenia. And this young man, and at certain ages, based on the brain development with certain mental health disorders, you don't get that disorder or that label until you reach a certain milestone or age. Like, for instance, bipolar, you have to be more closer to adulthood because of the brain development, and they don't want to label you something until you get there. So this kid with schizophrenia, and he had this label at 16, so to speak, but which is abnormal because of his age. But the family didn't believe that he was hearing voices, and the mom was like, she was from Laos, and this is our cultural makeup, and to tell her, hey, this kid is maybe hearing voices at this point in time. You might want to make sure he's taking his medication, because if he's not, something can be harmful to himself or harmful to others, which happened, which we had to re-educate the mom. And then I guess once it happened, in a sense, over here in America, because she's from that country she was from, that she realized that this is real to life. This is not a game. This is something that is actually a thing. Which,
yes,
a lot of time when it comes down to our different cultures, our different where we from, so to speak, a lot of times our belief systems get in the way of what we actually see. It's almost like, do you believe in ghosts? And if you don't see it, I don't believe it, so to speak. The same thing with like anything in the brain, you can't see it. So it's like, unless they're behaving in a certain kind of way, we don't necessarily know what it is that's going on with them. That's why, like Nicolette was saying, that you have professionals that are here to, like a psychologist will give you a diagnosis, or a psychiatrist will tell you what kind of medication that you need based on their expertise. So we have to be willing to go see somebody who's an expert in that particular area to be able to tell us what we really need to do. And in a lot of times we don't do it because, of course, in our community, we don't like sharing things. We don't trust people. And that's been tradition. And even with what's still going on with the state of the world, we still are in that form of mindset where we don't trust telling our business, our family history to a stranger, in which, in order to fix some of these mental health problems, you have to talk to somebody. And 9 times out of 10, the person that you're talking to, you don't even know them. And you have to be able to be willing to put your trust in a complete stranger to tell you what you need to do for your brain. Same as you do with your doctor. If your doctor tells you now have diabetes and you got to take metformin or whatever you got to take, now the same thing with this psychiatrist. I'm telling that you have bipolar and you got to take this medication that's for bipolar, and you have to take it. And if you don't, it's almost like, again, with medication and taking medication, if you take it for a week and don't take it for a month, it's null and void, because it takes a certain amount of time for the medicine to get in your system and to work. And if you miss a dosage, it's like you not having taken it in so long. So it's tricky. And we have to understand all the education that comes behind it. It's not something, you have people who have studied for years, like Nicolette. She went to school and got the education. And even when we go to school and get this education, we got to constantly learn. We got to do years and years of in-service. And that's the professionals. Just imagine people who don't understand the mental health and don't have the training. You got people who constantly have to get educated because things change. So that's where we are, hopefully people will begin, we've been having this discussion for years now, but hopefully people will begin to take it serious and understand and stop with the taboo. The taboo is what's affecting our communities, silent killers, just like diabetes and hypertension, mental health disorder, the silent killers. So, we got to understand that. So it's going to take the village to get it right. So I think that's what we have to look at and how we have to look at it.
No, go ahead, Nicolette, go ahead.
I just wanted to say this too. I think when we love people that have mental health situations in our community, we underestimate what could happen. Okay. We don't, because we're looking at this person as, oh, that's just JoJo. You
Right.
know, JoJo wouldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? Because you're looking at JoJo as being your cousin or your son
Right.
or your husband, you know, but you don't know what's going on in JoJo's head when he's
Right.
having, you know, these grandiose thoughts or
Right.
things are going on, and you don't know what's going on in JoJo's head, and you don't know that what the voices are telling JoJo.
Right.
If the voices are telling JoJo to kill you because because he has to save the world,
Right.
in JoJo's mind, he's not killing you.
Right.
JoJo is saving the world.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
and
Right.
that's the thing. That's where we mess up with mental health situations. We look at our loved ones, and even from when the world is looking on these situations, they're not seeing it from a mental health perspective.
Right.
You know, so that's one of the things I think we underestimate the situation with our loved ones that deal with mental illness, and
Right.
that's why we don't get them the help that they need, you know, and so things get out of hand, and unfortunately people lose their lives because we
Right.
don't take it serious. We have to
Right.
really truly know that JoJo is not JoJo if
Right.
he has a serious situation and voices are telling him that to kill his family because he's going to save the world.
Right.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
to know when JoJo says those voices are coming. JoJo, have you been taking your meds?
Right.
JoJo, have you called your doctor? JoJo, let's take a trip. You know, we need to start dealing with JoJo right then and there.
Right. And a lot of people don't like when people hear medication, we get it sometimes. Like, I'm not one to push medication. And this is what we talk, to our family, especially when we have kids that need medication. This is real life stuff. So we look at medication as last or worst case scenario. However, sometimes depending on the illness, you have to have the medication. There's no way around it. And if you don't get the medication, something like Nicolette was saying, something worse will happen. And it's not if, it's when. So, because that disorder, it's not like, we have this disorder that we use with kids sometimes in North Carolina. We call it oppositional defiant disorder. That's just them being defiant. But you have someone who's quote unquote a mood disorder that may go into a bipolar. That's a real mental health issue. So we have to understand, and that's all about the education behind it. You have to understand what it is that you're really dealing with, and know that there's action plans behind it, and it's not just a one-time thing. And you think your family member, Uncle JoJo, is going to do it this one time, and that's the only time I have to be on Uncle JoJo. No, this is a lifetime commitment. You have to commit to this with this person, so they'll understand that they have somebody that's going to be there for them and keep them in order as they go along this thing. Because a lot of times when you talk about depression, most people feel that they're alone. It's that they're helpless and hopeless. So everything becomes bigger than normal. Like the worst case scenario, it's almost like, and instead of the glass is half full, everything is half empty. It's the negative, the pessimistic brain. And so, everything becomes, and they feel like they're in this pit with nobody else. So we got to understand what it is that they're dealing with. And each mental health disorder is different. It's like I won't treat somebody who has hypertension the same way I'll treat somebody with diabetes. It's two different things, even though they connect somewhere along. And most of the time, if you got diabetes, you sometime or another going to have hypertension and vice versa. But we have to know that whatever it is that they're treating, that the professional said that they have, then we that's what we have to treat. Because a lot of time in the Black community, we always say, "Oh, they crazy," and we say, "Oh, they bipolar." But we're not professionals to be able to say that somebody's bipolar. But if we feel there's something wrong, then send them somewhere that would get them the professional opinion of that, and not just chalk it up as they bipolar. They might be.
That's
right. Need to get that professional opinion to make sure that they're saying that they're bipolar. So
the other thing that I see a lot of also, or that I hear a lot, is those that have been diagnosed and do get the meds. Many times they say they don't like being on them or staying on them because of the way that the meds make them feel.
Right.
Yeah, the meds make them feel not like themselves. And I think about that, because if this is somebody that has had this going on for a long time, and now all of a sudden you're giving them meds that maybe the voices have stopped, or maybe the manic has stopped, but they've gotten so accustomed to that. Is it that the meds really are making them feel bad or whatever, or is it just that it is taking them out of something that was comfortable to them because they had grown accustomed to the other mental health stuff? And sometimes I think about that, is it really that the meds are making you feel bad, or is it that it's taking you outside of what you have been accustomed to dealing with?
I do know that those meds have side effects.
Right.
They can make you extremely tired.
They do.
Some people, it depends on what they're on. You know, some people, the meds can make them not themselves. Like they're more slower than normal. You know, it slows them down. You know, a little bit. So it has a drug effect, like any other drug. But it manages the symptoms. It manages the symptoms. And so a lot of times that's why some people self-medicate, like those with schizophrenia, for example. I remember seeing a lot of clients that had schizophrenia, and they prefer not to take the Latuda. They want marijuana. They felt like marijuana helped them better than the Latuda. But the thing is, marijuana actually makes schizophrenia worse. It makes it worse. And people think, oh, marijuana is this miracle cure. But actually, marijuana is the enemy to schizophrenia. And people don't know that, and so that's the thing, you have to, it's just like when you go to surgery, they tell you your risk. I'm gonna fix this problem through surgery, but these are the risks that are involved. So there's risk with everything. So you have to make that decision. Do I want to have this episode where I end up killing my whole family, or do I want to get on these meds and actually live a somewhat normal life?
Right. Like Nicolette was saying with the medication, of course, there's a side effect. Like you see these drug commercials where they tell you the good things, and then all of a sudden you hear this man in the background speaking real fast, the side effects, and you don't hear what he's saying. That's any medication that we take. And
it's like, okay, I'll keep what I had. I'm sorry.
Right. You have to weigh the options.
I just go natural.
You weigh the options, and even with dealing with I see this a lot with kids. They pull this thing. I don't like how it makes me feel. It slows me down. It makes me feel a little loopy. And then I train my staff to say, okay, that's fine. And we want to hear your opinion about it, and we're gonna do something about it. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go back to that psychiatrist, and we're gonna tell the psychiatrist, these are the effects that is going on with me right now. Is there something else that I can take? Because sometimes again, one medication for my brain may do something totally different from that same medication for somebody else's brain. So we have to understand that, sometimes it does take trial and error for the medication. And even with certain medications, when they give you a medication, they may have to bump up the dosage, which again, trial and error. So we have to understand that when you first get a medicine, that's not going to be necessarily the cure-all for that situation that you have going on. You might have to go through trials to make sure you get to that right regimen. And even if you take multiple medication, you might have to go through regimens, because sometimes medications, as your body adapts to it, the medications don't have the same effect. We've had kids that have had to go to the hospital and do what they call a med wash, because the medication that they've been on for so long, or the regimen that they're on, didn't work, and they're constantly in and out of the hospital. So now the doctor at that hospital has to decide whether or not they want to wipe the slate clean and try something else, which means that if I'm taking them off all these medications, I have to keep them in a safe place in order for us to monitor them. So to put them on another medication. So medication is also a tricky thing, just like getting them appropriately diagnosed is a tricky thing. So you want to make sure that, people have the education behind it. It's not like, you're going to get this pretty clear cut plan that you're going to have. I'm giving you this manual on how your mental health should go, and this is how it's going to go. We don't know this because, again, it's the brain, and people are still trying to get an understanding of the brain and how the brain operates, because again, the brain just like the heart is one of the most is the two most important organs in our body, and one without the other we have no life. So, you know, we have to understand that. And the medication piece is just as tricky at times. It's not going to be something that's going to be like somebody going to give you a pill a day and you're going to be okay with it. Some people is like that, but some people are not. So again, it's situational. We have to take every situation differently.
Okay. So Leslie says inner city community teens experience warlike actions and suffer from PTSD. I believe that. That's probably very, very true. Tammy says that we try to control it in-house, that we do. A lot of times we try to control it in-house, don't want to take it to a professional.
Right.
Charlotta says, unfortunately, my cousin Joe went through this. We didn't look at it as he had a mental illness. Now he is in prison for life. And that is so, so true. That happens often.
Right.
Also, many aren't aware that proper diagnosis can take years and requires patience.
Right.
Tammy also says that we need a real education. We lack education. And then she talks about the street doctors.
Right.
Getting into the street doctors. Let's see. This next comment says, people must be patient regarding medications because against it may take a while for the desired result. It may take a while, exactly. It may take a while for a proper result. And it was 2 to 4 years for diagnosis, and then another 2 years for proper meds, then another year after finding the right meds, I guess before everything actually leveled out the way that it needed to be. So it's not easy. It's not easy. So let's pivot just a little bit and talk more specifically about where we are right now with the pandemic, because I think that there may be some people that before now may not have known they had some mental health stuff going on, but now that they've been locked up in that house and can't get out of that house, they may be feeling some kind of way. I've seen terms like anxiety, anxious, being overwhelmed, people, I guess, having withdrawal from not being able to be around people. So how would you all speak to that? And are there any particular tips that you might give people to kind of help them through that process since we've been quarantined for so long?
Yeah, I think for it's all about self-awareness, right? It's those self-awareness, self-control, self-determination, self. So understanding yourself, like being isolated in, for the way we are, and it looks like that's where we're gonna be for the remainder of this year. And it looks like we may even go back to stage ones in certain places where we are pretty much can only go out for essential things. So understanding that, being by yourself sometimes will help you learn who you really are, especially if you can't get to loved ones that you used to. You don't have the chance to communicate personally, face to face with people. That touch, that love language, that we have that we're not able to get at this point in time can cause us. There's, you can either get more mental illness or you can begin to get mental illness from this situation, depending on who you are and what you have going on. And understanding that is going to be vital, that, take a look at yourself and what it is that really is going on with you and being honest. Because again, that's the main thing with any relationship with yourself or relationship with others. You have to be honest in that relationship. And if you're not honest, he's like, oh, it's nothing wrong with me, I'm okay. But you're steadily, paranoid about certain things. That's a discrepancy. So we have to understand these discrepancies and be willing to do so. And outside looking in, if you're a loved one, you have to be willing to see those things in your significant other. It's not about what we say sometimes. It's all about our eyes and ears at times when we have to recognize what's going on with mental health and mental illness. We have to be able to see it and understand that there's something different going on with this person. And again, it's sometimes going outside of ourselves. So we have those lenses to be able to see what's going on. So something like COVID-19 is something different that most of us have never seen. Like you have older individuals that are around you that can talk about, you know, the real wars they've had, like the older people that's World War I. There was someone on the news that talked about she got through the whole thing with Germany back in the day, but she overcame COVID-19 too. So she's an older lady. So, you know, being able to see that's rare that you see that. So most of us have never experienced anything like this in our lives, and it looks like this is going to be a way of life for us moving forward with this whole COVID thing, because this was a nasty and is a nasty disease. So it's going to cause trauma in the brain and secondary trauma, and understanding what trauma is and what it looks like. And we talked about it. Education is going to be key, and that's what we have to be able to do. We have to educate our communities. The church, as the church, we have to be able to put things in place, programs in place in our communities, so individuals that come to church and see the leaders in church talking about this stuff, then they know, okay, we have these influential people that we listen to and we follow their word. They're talking about mental health. We need to go ahead and follow what they're saying. So it's going to take leadership. It's going to take the state and government funding, because a bigger picture is the lack of funding. You know, one person talked about the community and the kids in the community. The reason why the kids are going crazy because there's been a lack of funding in the communities, and there's nothing for them to do but gravitate towards the bad stuff. So we have to, the government, the people that we elect into these positions, we have to force them to put money into the mental health, because this is not a cheap fix. They in the 80s they did a lot of changes across the country and cutting funding with mental health, and we're suffering from it right now. It's like the crack pandemic. They put the crack in the communities. Now they got to pay to get the crack out the communities, which it takes more money. The residual effects of our men in jails, our women in jails, because of this pandemic that they put upon us. So another pandemic is upon our communities, and our communities are the least to get the funding. So of course we're suffering the most. So again, we have to be willing to do extra things at this point in time to fix the problem, because it's not a quick fix. This is going to take years. I mean, it took 6 months for this thing to happen, but it's going to take years for it to be rebounded if we can rebound from it. So it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of patience, and it's going to take a lot of these type of forums that you're doing, Cheryl, because this is very important for the education of our community to be able to put things in the forefront that people will listen to and talk about. So, and it got to be transparency. We have to be transparent.
Yeah. So I wanted to just add to that by saying, I think COVID-19 really illuminated this situation of mental health in the house. It made people stop passing it up to actually see that thing for what it is, so that they can recognize this is serious. Soon this COVID happened, the domestic violence went up, anger issues, all of these things happened. These murder suicides increased, depression, increased, suicide. A lot of people, became suicidal at the point of this. And things that there's a lot of trauma that's happening because the loss of so many lives.
Right.
People have lost multiple loved ones at a time. That alone can cause PTSD. That alone, can cause mental illness. The actual climate that we're in governmental wise, with the president that's totally insensitive to the time that we're in, and people that are feeling as though they're just oppressed and not taking regard for certain race of people, and all of that is overwhelming. It becomes overwhelming. And what I would say, during COVID-19, it's taken a toll on people that normally wouldn't even think that they struggled with a mental illness, but now they're beginning to see that they too are not able to cope. That's why the alcoholism, they bought alcohol like crazy. People begin to drink more than often, during this time, then to think church was something that some went to kind of, manage, their emotions and, be able to cope. but there's no church,
Mhm.
that people can go to. You can go online. I mean, but what, for some people, that's not cutting it.
Right.
So I think that what we have to do is we have to create a safe environment
Mm-hmm.
mentally.
Right.
And the way we have to do that is we kind of have to actually withdraw ourselves from the negative.
Right.
All of the media, the news, seeing this person died here, this one died, 15 people died today,
Right.
100 people
Right.
died yesterday. We just become just totally consumed with all of the negative.
Right.
And we begin to put ourselves, in the forefront of it all. And we're taking
Right.
all this in. And that's what causes a breakdown. So we have to kind of withdraw ourselves from all the negativity and find a way to laugh, find a
Right.
way to, to be positive, find a way to bond with your family,
Right.
to be closer, do something different, in the house, other than just, look at all the negativity or stay on social media to see all the news that's
Right.
going on. So we have to really be mindful of what we're doing, and we have to actually put some measures in place to bring our mindset to a more positive place.
Or like the Bible would say, to guard your heart and guard your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get all that stuff out of there. Tammy says that imagine being trapped in your home with your biggest enemy, yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And then the next one says, not to mention the lack of closure for families who had members that had to die alone.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to say this, Cheryl, and when it comes down to we talked about the word, we said trauma a lot today, and I want people to slow down a little bit and think about what trauma is and what it does. And trauma in the brain, for instance. And I want to throw out an analogy. Like we see on TV a lot when it talks about somebody who smokes, right? And they show a healthy lung, and then they show a lung that has been affected by years of smoking. It looked totally different. You have the healthy lung is very pink and, it looks healthy. And then the unhealthy lung looks all gray. Same with trauma. Like I want people to look up trauma in the brain, and so they can see images of a traumatic brain and what a healthy brain looks like versus a traumatic brain. Like images that I've seen of a traumatic brain, you have this gray matter in certain places of the brain where the trauma is affecting that part of the brain. So trauma affects how you think. For example, some child that has experienced trauma at the age of, let's say, 9 years old, some sort of traumatic event, what is some sort of abuse, witness somebody dying or something that's been traumatic to the brain, they will grow physically from that point on as a normal person. Their body will develop, everything will go, but their brain may be stuck at a 9-year-old brain.
Yeah.
So it almost like when they become 16, we've had issues like that where somebody might appear that they have an intellectual delay based on they're not learning, but it could be a traumatic brain where they're still at 9-year-old and they act like a 9-year-old because that's where their brain was last healthy. So those are the things that we have to understand. Like when it comes down to trauma, whether it's firsthand trauma or secondary trauma, it affects the brain in a sense where, we start acting differently. We may, think differently. We approach the world differently. So all this COVID stuff, and like Nicolette was saying, the things that we see on TV, I see, all I see is police brutality. I see us protesting and us getting in conflicts with, the right versus the left. And it's only thing you see on TV is constant worry, constant trauma, and it will affect the brain. That's that secondary trauma. It's not you personally going through it, but it's you seeing it all the time, and it begins to make you feel a certain kind of way. Like I had to unplug a few times because being in the field, that's all I see. Like when I come home from dealing with the field, I have to decompress sometimes because it's in me. So we have to understand that when it comes down to the brain and a healthy brain, like most of us are dealing with some sort of mental health illness in some time or another in our life, whether it's somebody, a loved one that has passed away, and we still not over that, and it's been 10 years since a mom or a dad has passed,
Right.
we haven't grieved. And other people got to understand grief comes in different forms as well, where you might have a lost parent that divorced, and now I don't see dad anymore. That's a level of loss. So we got to understand all this stuff in our community, all this stuff that's filled in our brains that are affecting what we do in life. And it's what we seen in our community. Like, we at one time, we never thought about our people having suicidal thoughts, and because we so resilient, we're so this, and we are able to overcome all these years of oppression. We don't, but now look at it. We see a lot of us self-medicating, and and it becomes, it's running rampant, and we're not addressing it. The small part of the community that is addressing it is not enough to overcome the large majority of the community that's not. So again, a bad apple, guess what's going to ruin the bunch? So we got to deal with our bad apples when it comes down to how we address mental health. And again, it's not going to be a quick fix. It's going to be something that's ongoing. And we could have all kinds of panels and discussions about. I think it's worth it. Cheryl, I'm charging you. It's worth. We can do this every week.
So you know what? So you know what? It's been great talking to y'all. We're at the top of the hour, and I'm going to take you up on that challenge, because I was getting ready to say we're going to reconvene and do one strictly about grief, because that struck a chord with me. Because you're right. There are people, it seems like every other day I'm getting messages from people saying that somebody passed away here, somebody passed away there. It's all in the news. So we'll reconvene. If you guys are available, come back, and I have a couple of other people that probably would be good to talk about the grief aspect as well. You guys have been awesome. The information that you shared has been awesome. Hopefully they'll share this all over Facebook, and people can start talking about it. We can have dialogue about it, because that's really the only way that it's going to change. Everybody, I've been speaking with Hurley Morgan and with Nicolette Hines about how are you doing? A conversation about mental health during this pandemic. We're glad that you joined us. We will be back again. We have conversations with Cheryl every Saturday at 11 o'clock. Central Standard Time, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.